Welcome to the first module of SRWE course. All the Cisco networking devices come with built-in configuration. It raises a question, why should we be bothered to learn configuration again? The answer is pretty simple. As a network administrator, you need detailed control of the devices in your network. To achieve that, precise configuration of switches and routers is required. Skills to make the devices do what you want them to do is very much essential for any network aspirant. This module is going to provide an overview of the configuration settings. So let's get started. So these are the different topics that we are going to cover as part of this particular module. So we are going to cover basic switch settings, securing remote access, basic router configurations, and how do you verify the directly connected networks of a particular router. So first, let us start with the initial configuration of a switch. You already studied this a little bits and pieces of these things in your ITN course also, but here we are going to do an overview of them again. Let's talk about the switch boot sequence. Before you can configure a switch, the first thing you need to do is you need to power it on. So once the Cisco switch is powered on, it goes through a 5-step boot sequence. The first step is the switch loads a POST program. POST stands for Power On Self Test program stored in the ROM. So this POST checks the CPU subsystem. It also tests the CPU, DRAM, the portion of the flash device that makes up the flash file system. The second step is the switch loads the bootloader software. The bootloader is a small program stored in the ROM that is run immediately after successful completion of the POST. Then followed by step 3. Here the bootloader program performs low-level CPU initialization. It initializes the CPU registers which control where the physical memory is mapped, the quantity of memory and its speed and other settings. After this is done, the bootloader initializes the flash file system on the system board. The final step, step 5, is where the bootloader locates and loads the default iOS system software image into memory and gives the control of the switch over to the iOS. So this is called as the 5-step boot sequence. This sequence happens after you power on a Cisco switch. Now, what do you mean by the boot system command? What happens here is the switch attempts to automatically boot by using the information in the boot environment variable. Now, if this variable is not set, the switch attempts to load and execute the first executable file that it can find. What is this boot environment? The boot environment variable is set using the boot system global configuration mode command. Generally, you know that when we do the copy running config to startup config, the startup config file is called config.txt and it is located in the flash memory. Now, if you see here in this example, you can observe that when I type in this particular command, so boot system is your main command, then flash is the location, the storage device, and this part is the path to the file system, and the last one is the actual iOS file name which ends with bin. So this is how you can actually use the command show boot to see what the current iOS boot file is set to. This is regarding the boot system command. We have multiple Cisco LED indicator or the LED indicators on a Cisco switch. These indicators will actually help the network administrator to quickly monitor switch activity and performance. These switches might be different, or these LED indicators might be different on different types of switches, but most common ones are mentioned over here. The first light is the system LED one. It shows whether the system is receiving power and functioning properly or not. The second one stands for RPS, redundant power supply LED. It shows what the current status of RPS is. Third one is your port status LED. When green, it indicates the port status mode is selected, which is the default one. Then comes the duplex LED. When green, it indicates this particular mode is selected, port duplex mode is selected. Next one is port speed LED. When green, it indicates that the port speed mode is selected. The last one is something called as PoE, which stands for Power over Ethernet LED. This is present if the switch supports PoE. Now, in order to toggle between these different modes, there is a mode button at the bottom. This is used to move between the different modes. You can switch between duplex status, duplex speed, and PoE. Now, when you move these between these modes, the LED indicators are of different things. Like, so if the LED, now let me take one example for RPS, the backup power. If the LED indicator is off, it means that there is no RPS. If the LED indicator is green, it says that RPS is ready. If it is blinking green, it says that RPS are but not available at the moment. If it is amber, RPS standby or faulty. If it is blinking amber, that means that internal power supply has been failed and RPS is providing power. So in this way, when you select the mode button, each LED indicators, by looking at these types of, maybe it's green or blinking green or amber or blinking amber, the network administrator can identify what the situation is or how the switch is currently working, what is the activity going on. So this is regarding your system LED indicators. Now, what happens if there is a crash? If the operating system cannot be used, or if it doesn't happen, there is also a way around it. Now, usually the boot loader provides access into the switch if the operating system cannot be used because of a missing file or a damaged file. What happens is, first you need to connect the switch to a PC by a console connection. Then you must be having some kind of terminal emulation software on your PC running to connect to the switch. After you do this, you unplug the switch power cord. Then reconnect the power cord, and within 15 seconds, press and hold down the mode button. And you hold down the mode button until the system LED is still flashing green. Now continue pressing this mode button until the system LED turns briefly amber and then solid green. Then you can release the mode button. After that, you can see the prompt switch in your terminal emulation software. Once you see this prompt, it is easy for you to run commands to format the file system, to reinstall the operating system, or even if you want to recover a lost or a forgotten password which you have set for the switch, all these things can be used. So this is how you recover from a system crash. These are the steps that needs to be followed. Now, we studied about the remote access, providing remote access to a switch in our first course, ITN course. Once again, in order to remotely access a switch, SVA has to be set up on the switch virtual interface. There are a couple of steps which needs to be taken down. The first step is you have to configure that management interface. Generally, we are in the habit of using interface VLAN 1, which is the default VLAN on all ports. But for security purposes, it is recommended to use a different VLAN for the management VLAN. We will study more about VLANs and what do you mean by VLANs, why should we go for them from our module 3 onwards. And now, as you all know that, first thing is you configure the management interface. That means these commands we already done many number of times. Starting, let's go into the global configuration mode by typing in configure terminal, and then you specify which VLAN you want to do it. Interface VLAN 1 we are very much used to, but as I said, taking the best security practices into mind, you can set up VLAN 99 and then assign the appropriate IP address along with the subnet mask. And you can actually assign an IPv6 address also along with the prefix, and then type in no shutdown. That means the particular interface is now active. Then you can copy the running config to startup config. After this, the second step is you have to configure the default gateway if you want to access the switch remotely. Unless until you set up the IP default gateway, your switch will not be accessible from remote networks. The same command can be used. You can just type in IP default gateway and give the default gateway's IP address. You need not enter the IPv6 default gateway address because the switch can learn about it from the router advertisement message. The final step is once you have completed all these things, in order to verify the configuration, you can just type in the show IP interface brief or the show IPv6 interface brief commands, and you can check out whether all the configurations are done properly or not. Please remember that whenever you are applying an IP address using the SVA for the remote access of a switch, it does not make the switch, or it does not allow the switch to route layer 3 packets. You are just providing the capability to remotely access this particular switch by assigning an SVA. Other than that, it does not have a capability of routing packets. You need to remember that. Let's move on to configuration of switch ports. So what are the different configurations that we need to make or that we can make for switch ports? Usually The ports of a switch can be configured independently for different needs. You know that the three modes of communication: simplex, half duplex, and full duplex communications. Full duplex communication actually increases bandwidth efficiency because it allows both ends of a connection to transmit and receive data simultaneously, just like your mobile phone. Both the communicating parties can communicate at the same time. This is also called as a bidirectional communication, and it requires microsegmentation. Now, a microsegmented LAN is created when a switch port has only one device connected to it, and it is operating in full duplex mode. When this happens, there is no collision domain associated with a switch port operating in full duplex mode. Unlike full duplex, the other option for you is half duplex, which is unidirectional. This creates performance issues because data flow in only one direction at a time, and it results in collisions. So some switches like gigabit and 10 GB NICs, they require full duplex connections to operate. Full duplex usually operates at 100% efficiency in both directions. And when it operates at 100% efficiency, it results in doubling the potential use of the stated bandwidth. Whatever bandwidth is provided to you, it actually doubling of the potential use of it. Okay. Now, what are the different commands that you need to implement if you are to manually configure the settings? There are two important commands to configure switch ports at the physical layer. One of it is called as the duplex, and the other one is the speed command. Generally talking, the default setting for both duplex and speed is auto. You keep it on auto. There are three options for you: 10 Mbps, 100 Mbps, and 1000 Mbps ports. Usually the 10 or 100 Mbps ports can work in half duplex mode or full duplex mode, but the gigabit port or the 1000 Mbps port are actually set to operate only in full duplex mode. There is a feature called as auto negotiation, which is useful when you don't know what type of speeds or what kind of duplex settings you need to set for these particular devices. And one thing you need to take into consideration is when you're troubleshooting the switch port issues, you have to check the duplex and speed settings, because mismatched settings for this duplex mode and the switch speed of the switch ports can cause connectivity issues. If the auto negotiation fails, it creates mismatched settings. It will have an impact on the network communication. So when you're troubleshooting it, it is also a good session to check whether these commands are entered and what are the whether these two things are matched or not. Now, if you check it out, this is a little small example over here where I'm going to assign the speeds for switch S1. So here the F0 by 1 port, here the switch F0 by 1 port is going to be configured. So once again, I enter into the global configuration using configure terminal command. After that, I enter into the interface mode, interface F0 by 1. Then I'm setting it as duplex full and speed as 100 Mbps. And similar kind of commands will be issued for S2 also. So both the links will be matched. Their duplex settings and speed settings are matched, and there should be no issue with the communication. Okay. So there is a feature called as Auto MDIX, which stands for Automatic Medium Dependent Interface Crossover. This is a very nice feature included because usually there are two types of cables. One of them is called as straight through cable, and the other one is called as a crossover cable, which we studied during our physical layer video. So these cables are actually used to connect different devices, different types of devices. Sometimes maybe human error, because of human error, one might connect a different type of cable for one type of connection. So if such mismatch happens, communication will not take place. But with Auto MDX enabled, either type of cable can be used to connect to other devices, and that interface will automatically adjust to communicate successfully. By default, the Auto MDX is enabled, and if you don't want this in for any particular reason, you can always use the no command to disable this particular feature. But usually we leave it on auto because it enables us to connect any type of cable, and the interface automatically will adjust according to the table and then according to the cable and then communicate successfully. So these are all the different switch verification commands. We have studied them earlier itself. Show interfaces, which displays the interface status and configurations. Show startup configuration. Show running configuration. Show flash, which displays information about the flash file system. Show version gives you the system hardware and the software status. And show history will actually display the history of all the commands that you entered previously. Show IP interface or IPv6 interface, you can type in brief also, which displays the IP information about one particular interface. And you can also type in show MAC address table, which displays your MAC address table. Okay, these are the different show commands that we used earlier itself. If you see here, if I can just type in at the switch show interfaces fast Ethernet 0x18, I'm just taking it as an example. Now this particular show command has given me a lot of output. Now the very first thing here you have to find out is there are two lines. Fast Ethernet is up and another one called as line protocol is up. Okay, so the first parameter refers to the hardware layer, which is the fast Ethernet 0x18 is up, refers to the hardware layer and indicates whether the interface is receiving a carrier detect signal or not. The second parameter, which shows me the line protocol is up, refers to the data link layer and it indicates whether the data link layer protocol keep alives are being received or not. Other than this, there are some other information which is shown here, shows input error, 3 input errors, 3 CRC, 8 output errors, some collisions, interface resets, late collisions, 0 runs and 0 james. So these are some of the errors. They will not actually lead to termination of the communication, but might impact the network performance. Those things are here. We will discuss about these things. So input errors means it is the sum of all errors in the datagrams that are received on the interface being monitored, which includes runs, jains, CRC. No buffer, frame, overrun, or ignored grounds. So runt frame means any frame which is less than the minimum 64 byte size is called as a runt frame. Usually they are discarded. These are actually created by collisions. Jains means the frames whose size exceeds the maximum limit. They are called as jains. Once again, they are also be discarded. CRC errors are caused by many causes, which might indicate a cable error, a media error, electrical interference, some noise, loose connections, or incorrect cabling. Any of those things lead to CRC errors. Whereas output errors is the sum of all errors that prevent the final transmission of datagrams out the interface that is being examined. Input errors means these are the errors that were received on the interface being examined. Output error means which prevented the final transmission out of the interface, and that means outgoing out of the interface that is being examined. The two common things are collisions and late collisions. Collisions in half duplex operations are quite normal. If you set it up for full duplex communication, it is very rare to have a collision. Late collision refers to a collision that occurs after 512 bits of the frame has been transmitted. Usually it's a common thing in networks that a collision usually happens during the first 512 bits of transmission. If the first 512 bits are transmitted without any issue, the frame tends to be successfully transmitted. There is another reason for late collision is also the duplex misconfiguration command. If you haven't set the duplex settings properly, it might lead to late collisions. So this is regarding about the interface input and output errors. These are the different errors that you might find, and usually you get this information also in the show commands output. Now let's talk about the securing the remote access. When I talk that a switch can be remotely accessed, there are two ways of doing it. One of it, and the old way of doing it, is through telnet operation. So telnet uses TCP port 23. It is an old protocol and it is an unsecure protocol. The reason why I say unsecure protocol is it tends to send the data that we are transmit between the client and server in an unencrypted format, that is in plain text. And if you have a threat actor or an attacker who captures the packets going on the network and monitors them using a tool like Wireshark, by just analyzing the packets, you will be able to understand what is the username and what is the password that has been set in. You can see there. When you capture the packets that are being sent across using telnet, and if anybody captures it, there you go, he will be able to deduce what the username is and what the password is. So that is the reason most of the network administrators tend to block telnet access. The other alternative for securely communicating to a switch remote means is SSH. SSH stands for Secure Shell. It is a secure protocol which works on TCP port 22. Here, what it does is whatever communication you are transmitting, it encrypts them, so that even though an attacker captures the packets and analyzes it, he will not be able to deduce what the information is. You can see here, this is what he looks like. This is what the Wireshark capture of a SSH session looks like. The attacker will not have any idea what kind of message is being transmitted. That is the reason usually when you do remote access to a switch, we should be strictly placing a rule that only SSH access should be allowed. So how do you do that? Now, first thing is you need to check whether the switch supports SSH or not. For that, you can simply type in show version command. Once you type in this show version command, you will get this kind of output. Now in this output, you get the iOS file name. And in this file name, if you can find the combination K9, if you can find the combination K9, it automatically means that the switch has the capability to support cryptographic features and capabilities. In simpler terms, it supports SSH. So the first thing you need to do is you need to check whether the version supports, the iOS version supports SSH or not. And for that, just type in show version and look at the iOS file name. If it has K9, it supports it. If it doesn't have K9, it's a different thing altogether. Now in the ITN course also, we actually went through different steps of configuring SSH and also securing access through SSH. The same thing is being discussed over here. First thing is you need to verify the SSH support. That is done through show version command, and after that you need to configure an IP domain, and after configuring an IP domain, then you have to generate RSA key pairs by using crypto key generate RSA. After that, you have to create a username and password, create a local database using just like an authentication server. Once you do that, you have to configure the VTY lines so that access is restricted, and it actually whoever is trying to connect through SSH should be authenticated from the local username database that you just created in step number 4. Step 6 is enable SSH version 2. Usually by default SSH supports both versions, but if you type in IP SSH 2, it automatically switches to, or it enables the version 2 of SSH. I'm going to actually already made a video on SSH, but there is a packet tracer activity regarding this. We'll do it again, and I will place that video. You can check it out in order to get hands-on experience on configuration of SSH. So to display the version and configuration data for SSH on the device that you configured as an SSH server, you can just type in the show IP SSH command. You can see once you type in this command of show IP SSH, you can see the version 2.0 is enabled over here. This is what you can also use the show SSH command also. It will show you the different connections that are actually running using this particular SSH. Let's talk about router configuration now. So basically in Cisco, switch and router configurations are pretty much similar. If you see here, the same thing, the same set of commands are used for router configuration also, including the host name, safeguarding the privileged mode, then securing the console and VTY lines, and encrypting all passwords, followed by creating a banner message, and then saving the changes. So this pretty much we have done many number of times in CCNA1, and the same things are carried over here. And on top of these things, for routers, we need to assign the IP addresses to the interfaces and activate the interfaces along with a description for that particular interface. So I'll show you the example. Now, if you check it out, for a router, if I want to go to a particular interface, here you go, I use the interface command, and I can assign the IP address, the scheme. So IP address followed by the subnet mask, then the IPv6 address, and usually we should also provide a description also. Description is useful for a network administrator to identify and understand the different interfaces present on the router. This is the way where you do the interface configuration on a Cisco router. You select the interface, assign the IP address, subnet mask, assign the IPv6 address, provide a description, and most importantly, you type in no shutdown to activate the interface, to bring the interface back on the on mode. Okay, there is another one called as IPv4 loopback interface. This is a logical interface which is internal to the router. It is not assigned to any physical port, and it cannot be connected to any other device. Then what is the purpose? The main purpose of using a loopback interface is because it can be used for testing and managing a Cisco iOS device. It ensures that at least one interface will always be available for you. The commands are pretty much simple. Interface loopback number, and then you assign the IP address with the subnet mask. But please remember that whatever IP address you are assigning for this loopback interface must be unique, and it should not be used by any other interface on this router. That is to be done. So after that, we have the verification commands on the router. Once you do all the configurations, you need to check whether the configurations you did are right or wrong, or if it is done any errors, if you want to find out anything else. Now in that, the best commands we use are the show IP interface brief, show running config interface ID, show IP route, and show IPv6 route. Now these commands and the outputs of these commands have been discussed extensively during your ITN course also, but let me give a quick recap. The show IP interface brief and the show IPv6 interface brief commands are used to quickly reveal the status of all interfaces on the router. You can actually clearly see which interfaces are assigned the address and whether their status is up or down. It's very easy to see. Now if you see, when you see these interfaces, you can clearly see if it is any mistake, whether they are assigned the right IP address or not. So this is for the first step, and then you can actually use the IPv6 interface brief command. When you type in show IPv6 interface brief command, it actually shows you two IP addresses. If you see here, it shows the link local address, and the other one is the global unicast address. It shows two commands. It shows the two addresses. So the link local address is automatically added to an interface if the global interface, the global unicast address is assigned or not, doesn't matter. Or whenever the global unicast address is assigned, the link local address will be assigned to it. It is mandatory that each and every IPv6 network interface to have a link local address, but not necessarily a global unicast address. And there are other addresses also. If you can see here, this is actually shows you all the other addresses. If you see here, these are all the multicast addresses, the global unicast address, the multicast addresses assigned to this interface. All the multicast addresses start with the prefix FF02. So this is all the information that you get by using the show IPv6 interface on a one particular interface. Okay. Now interface configuration, the same thing. This command will actually help you to display the current commands that are applied to one particular interface. So that is the reason show running config interface and the ID whichever interface you want to run it. And if you can see here, if I want to see what type of commands I entered for this G0x00 interface, I can just do this, and it gives me the output of all the commands that I entered for that particular interface. So then next comes your verify routes. If I type in show IP route, it provides me a list of all the directly connected network entries. So they are denoted by C and L. A C next to a route within the routing table indicates that this is a directly connected network to the router. L means it's a local host. So this is how your IPv route and the show IPv6 route looks like. This is just like the routing table which is present inside the router. So for all the interfaces of the router, what are the networks that it is connected to, shows it displays the output like this. So the next one is something called as show command. Usually gives you lot of output. Generally, the commands that generate multiple screens of output are paused after 25 lines. After 24 lines, you will see a small prompt at the bottom saying that more, a text. So I don't say it a prompt, it's a text that displays more. Now, when you press enter key, it goes to the next line. When you press the space bar, it displays the next set of lines. You can use the terminal length command to specify the number of lines to be displayed. If you set it up as 0, it prevents the router from pausing between screens of output. The best way of handling the show command output is use a pipe. That we use it for filtering. I'll show you the examples for this. There are generally 4 filtering parameters that can be configured after the pipe: section, include, exclude, and begin. So check this. The first thing is your section command. Now here it shows the entire section that starts with the filtering expression. Now on R1, I typed in show running config pipe. This is the pipe, and I typed in section line VTY. So it is showing to me the output related to this particular, or which starts with this expression line VTY, all the output. The second one is include. This includes all output lines that match the filtering expression. Now, what did I say? I typed in here show IP interface brief. It has given me the list of all the ports that are there, all the interfaces that are there. Now, if I type in include up, it is only going to display the interfaces that are in the up state. It excluded them. The third filtering command is to use exclude, which excludes all output lines that match the filtering expression. Similarly, I said exclude unassigned. Exclude. So it removed this particular entry where unassigned is there, and it has displayed all the other ones. The final one is something called as begin. This is also a filtering output which shows all output lines from a certain point, starting with the line that matches with your matching filtering expression. Now, if you say show IP route and begin gateway, so from the point where gateway comes, all the output following there will be displayed. So gateway of last resort is not set, and from that point onwards, all the remaining show command output is displayed. This is the way where you can actually use the show command output. Filtering increases efficiency if you know what you're doing with. If you are actually trying to find out what you really want, you can use these 4 commands to filter the show commands output. There is another called as command history. The command history feature is useful because it temporarily stores the list of executed commands to be recalled. Frankly speaking, it makes our job very easy. Just use the up and down arrow to scroll. If the alternative for these 2 arrows is Control P and Control N. You can use these 2 arrows to switch between the different commands that are recently used. Just scroll up and down to whichever command you want to. Now, for this also, command history is enabled. The system captures the last 10 command lines, but it will also allow you to increase this. If you see terminal history size 200, it will show you all the last 200 entered commands in the show history command. So this is what you actually see, terminal history size 200 and show history. We can actually also use these 2 commands to set it up. Okay, so that's it for the first module. I hope you have understood more about the configuration of switches and routers. We already did it in ITN, but there are little bits and pieces which are also studied here. I will do the packet tracer activity for this particular module 1 regarding SSH execution. Okay, thank you very much all of you for watching this video. Take care.